President Biden touts his economic plan, and the abortion debate moves from U.S. Supreme Court to the state Supreme Courts. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Ann Fisher, host of All Sides with Ann Fisher on 89.7 NPR News. Desiree Timms, president of Innovation Ohio. And Mark Weaver, Republican strategist. With inflation, interest rates, and gas prices hitting decades-old highs and his approval rating dropping below 40%, Joe Biden is trying to change the narrative of his first term. This week, he brought his message to union members in Cleveland.
The previous administration lost more jobs on its watch than any administration since Herbert Hoover. That's a fact. All based on failed trickle-down economics that benefit the wealthiest Americans and hit the middle class and working people the hardest. But we came in with a fundamentally different economic vision, an economy that grows from the bottom up and the middle out. It's good for everyone because when the middle class does well, the poor of a ladder up and the wealthy still do very well.
The president's case was bolstered by the June jobs report. The economy added 372,000 jobs and the unemployment rate stands at 3.6%. And Fisher, it's a glass half full, glass half empty. The economy has created record numbers of jobs, but we're seeing really high inflation, $5 a gallon gas. Which do voters care about as they head to the polls this November?
You know, that's a good question. I mean, obviously they care about their pocketbooks and what they have to shell out right now. But the fact that the jobs numbers are so good means they probably can afford to shell it out versus a bad jobs report, right? More of them can afford it. So I think all in all, right now, there's been lots of recession scare talk and that kind of a thing. But as it stands now, that's not necessarily, inevitable. So I think, also the election's how many months away, right? Yeah. That makes a difference too.
Desiree, the jobs report said wages had increased 5%, but inflation's at 8%. We're still losing ground.
That's absolutely right. I know when I talk to my friends and neighbors, they're talking about the cost of groceries and rent and gas. But what I also know is that the Biden administration is working hard to implement policies that will help these families earn more money and keep more money in their pocket, which is why we see such good numbers with unemployment. But also there have been bills introduced by Democrats in Congress that would punish corporations for price gouging that we have yet to see pass through the chamber, and that's because they don't have Republican support. And so we need Republicans to jump on board in order to help Americans afford their bills and the high costs that we all are experiencing, not just here in America, but around the world.
Mark, the unemployment's at 3.6%. We've gained back all the jobs we lost from the early days of the pandemic. Is it because people are getting more money through their paychecks, wages are increasing, and the stimulus money that went primarily right to the middle class? That's why we're having inflation, so it's kind of good in that way?
Well, inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. So it's classic inflation. And recession is two successive quarters of economic decline. We might be in one now. We won't know until the next report. The jobs numbers were artificially low because of the pandemic. So the job increase is really getting us back to normal. It's not like we're getting ahead any. Nearly everyone I talk to is worried about the economy. Democrats control Congress. They control the White House. And people are really upset. That's why the polls suggest that the wrong track environment, most Americans think we're on the wrong track. And President Biden's approval numbers, much lower than President Trump's this time, suggest it's going to be a strong Republican year in November.
It's not uncommon. I went back and looked at approval ratings for first-term presidents. Jimmy Carter was at 28% at his lowest point. Reagan was at 35%. H.W. Bush at 29%. W. Bush at 50%. He got the high mark. Obama 38%. Trump 34%. So this is pretty typical first 2 years of a new administration.
He's at 30% now, depending on which polls you look at. It should, depending on which one you're looking at, and that's the average. Yeah. It's trending downward, and he's not made a strong case. Americans don't have confidence in him, and Democrats control the policy branches and have done little to stem the problems Americans are facing.
Even Democrats are frustrated that he's not making a better case. I think the evidence is there for him to make a better case, but even Democrats are frustrated that he's not coming across forcefully enough with the numbers and punching them out to the public.
Desiree, in that speech in Cleveland, it was about 25 minutes long. He got to inflation in the last 5 or 6 minutes and only mentioned it once. Would it have been better for him to, quote, feel our pain, as Bill Clinton used to say, and talk more about it in the speech?
I certainly know that some of the pushback on President Biden and the administration is communications. We hear that every other week, especially on conservative channels, about the need for the Democrats and the Biden administration to message better on the wins. And the truth is, Democrats have delivered on the child care tax credit. They delivered on making sure everyone had access to the vaccines. President Biden is working on lowering gas prices. We're seeing them come down. I saw on Twitter, people were cheering for the 3 in front of the unleaded premium gas. And so it is happening. It's happening very slowly. And that's because Democrats are facing a lot of resistance. Republicans don't want to help out because why? They want to lean in on those poll numbers and they want to win in November. And so we're not going to see the bipartisanship we actually need, which would really help more people.
Mark, do Republicans bear some of the burden here?
Well, the Republicans are not steering the ship. The Democrats are, and it's much more than just bad communications by Joe Biden. Reuters this week reported that millions of gallons of oil that came from the Strategic Oil Reserve have actually been sold to China instead of used here in America. That was the Biden administration that tapped down that reserve and agreed to allow this to be given to China. So gas prices are just one tip of the iceberg of a real bad economic situation that Joe Biden has to own.
Tim Ryan, Senate candidate, was not there in Cleveland with the president. Nate Whaley, gubernatorial candidate, not there with the president. He gave him a shout out. Pretty typical. President's unpopular. You run in for office, you don't show up.
It's very typical. No
Scheduling
question about
conflicts,
it.
I'm sorry.
Of course, it cuts both ways. It happened a lot during the last presidential go-around. So yeah, no problem.
Desiree, there's been some criticism of Democrats that they're focusing on too many things: abortion, guns, redistricting, you name it. Biden's speech was very focused. He mentioned the Akron police shooting at the start, but otherwise it was very focused on the economy. Was that a better communication strategy?
I think it is very important to acknowledge what happened in Akron. Jayland Walker shooting made national news. My heart breaks for the family. 60 rounds fired into his body. For President Biden to be less than 60 miles away from where it happened, he definitely needed to address it. And so that was very smart and sophisticated communication strategy from the administration.
But he didn't get into abortion politics, didn't get into sweeping gun control legislation. He stuck to the economy.
He stuck to the economy because that's where we're seeing in terms of polling, right? We're seeing a lot of people talk about the economy. But we saw right after that, just today, President Biden announced his executive order on reversing as much as he possibly and legally can some of what the Supreme Court has done in terms of Dobbs.
All right. In many states, like Ohio, the fight over abortion will move to the legislature and eventually possibly the voters. But for now, the battles are in state Supreme Courts. The Ohio Supreme Court is considering a lawsuit filed by the ACLU and abortion providers. It says Ohio's Constitution protects a woman's right to an abortion. Last week, the Ohio Supreme Court rejected a call to immediately halt the state's so-called heartbeat law, which bans abortion after cardiac activity is detected. Mark Weaver, the court has not dismissed the case, so does the Ohio Constitution provide any kind of clear guidance on this issue?
It doesn't. When you look at the argument, it's rather far-fetched. It's based on a recent amendment to the state constitution that had to do with health care insurance. Health care insurance is how we pay for health care. Abortion is something much different. I think it's pretty clear the Supreme Court of the United States said in Dobbs, this is an issue that Americans themselves can decide by electing people to state legislators who share their views. I welcome that debate in Ohio and in other 49 other state capitals around the country.
Desiree, the plaintiffs, the ACLU and the providers, they say due process, right to privacy, and they mention this thing, which the language of it says health care and health insurance. So again, another perhaps less than artfully worded amendment, which could lead to differences of interpretation. But what do you think of their case?
Yeah, I think they have a strong case, and we will see a lot more to come from it. When we talk about abortion, abortion is health care. For example, there was a woman in the Dayton area who was diagnosed with cancer and needed chemotherapy. Well, she had to travel to Indiana to have an abortion. That's health care. There is a woman who, or a child who was 10 years old who needed to have an abortion. There are women and people who need abortions all the time for healthcare reasons or for not. Abortion is healthcare, has to deal with someone's body. And so I think there will be a strong argument for that, and especially because of some of the language that is coming out of the legislature that is causing concern for women in terms of privacy. Women are being told to delete their apps that tracks their periods and their menstrual cycles in fear of some privacy, invasion of privacy coming from folks who are trying to target and taunt them in fear of, them accessing abortion. And so I think there will be a lot of legal arguments to come. We will see how artful the litigators are, but we will see more from ACLU and Planned Parenthood and other groups.
I was kind of caught by surprise. This was moved to the state Supreme Court. We all thought the U.S. Supreme Court rules, then the legislatures will enact rules either protecting abortion rights or making them illegal, and then the voters eventually will decide. But this is kind of a detour.
I don't think it's a detour. I think they're going to try a lot. It's going to be a multimodal, response to Dobbs. It's not going to be one way or the other. And by the way, the Ohio General Assembly is so gerrymandered at this point that you can say the voters can pick and vote for whom they want, but the fact is, the way it stands now, lawmakers or candidates still pick who gets to vote for them.
Mark, when federal law generally trumps state law, shouldn't a U.S. Supreme Court ruling trump a state Supreme Court ruling?
Not in this case. In this case, the U.S. Supreme Court simply said this is not a matter for the judicial branch to decide. Judicial branches are unelected. In Ohio, we elect them, but at the federal level, they're elected, and they are not meant to do policy. The political branches, the executive branch, the legislative branch, that's where we do policy. And I disagree. I think if people feel strongly enough about an issue, they can turn any legislative district if they're mad about something. And every 10 years, one party or another accuses the other party of gerrymandering. This is our process. It's a political process, how we draw the lines. It has been since we're founded.
But in 2011, they passed the amendment about health care and health care insurance. It was made to undermine Obamacare. Sure. So that the voters did that, and now the court is interpreting that. Isn't that what's happening right now?
No, I think it's fine for someone to bring a case and the court to resolve it, but this is a policy question. Whether or not a state allows the intentional killing of innocent human life, which is the exact definition of abortion, is a policy question, just like whether we have the death penalty in this state, or whether we have any variety of policy issues. State legislators get to decide. That's what the Dobbs case was about.
Desiree, that's the bottom line. Is abortion health care in the traditional sense? You mentioned some cases where the mother's life was possibly in danger. Those are one set of cases, but in other cases, the mother's life is not in danger, or the woman's life is not in danger.
So when we saw the Affordable Care Act go before the Supreme Court, there were a number of takeaways from that. One being that the Affordable Care Act guarantees a woman's access to preventative health care. And preventative measures. And so abortion care is some sort of form of prevention when we talk about birth control and contraception, which is also threatened under Dobbs and the decision that came before that. And after that is that birth control is an issue. And so when we're talking about someone's right to choose what happens in the hospital room between their doctor, I think Republicans and the government shouldn't be in the room with you. That's between you and your doctor. And so these are issues that were litigated under the Affordable Care Act, and we'll begin to see some of the very same arguments reappear now after Dobbs in the state Supreme Courts around the country.
The majority opinion of Dobbs expressly said it has nothing to do with birth control. The majority holding says absolutely, it anticipated that argument and completely dismissed it.
But Clarence Thomas dissent. One justice
can have his own opinion.
But if they're saying they're not there to make policy and they shouldn't be making policy, that's making policy by telling the Americans what they can and can't define things as.
Making policy would have been if Dobbs had said there is no right to have an abortion and you cannot have an abortion because the Constitution prohibits it. If they were truly voting their religion, which they weren't, they would have said the Constitution says you can't have an abortion. That's not what Dobbs said. Dobbs said the states decide in the legislatures.
Okay. The abortion issue, along with the redistricting controversy, has put a lot of attention on the upcoming races for the Ohio Supreme Court. The court will have a new Chief Justice. Maureen O'Connor cannot run again because of age limits. Two sitting justices are running to replace her. Democrat Jennifer Brunner faces Republican Sharon Kennedy. In another race, incumbent Pat Fisher faces Democrat in appeals court Judge Terry Jamieson, and Republican Justice Pat DeWine, the governor's son, faces Democrat in appeals court Judge Marilyn Zayas. Desiree Timms, a lot of big races on the ballot this November. Governor, U.S. Senate. Is this the biggest, though, these three on the Supreme Court?
I think it's one of the biggest. I don't want to say one race is bigger than the other, because that's how you have people only voting for federal candidates on the ballot and they don't complete the entire ballot. But I do think the state Supreme Court race is a very important race. And we have 3 women who are running on the Democratic side, diverse ticket. And this is an opportunity for women and people around the state to allow their voices to be heard, especially when it comes to issues like Roe. We're seeing some very extreme legislation come from the MAGA Republicans in the state legislature that does threaten access to contraception, that does threaten access to bail reform, cash bail, that, you know, the Republicans are going all in. And once they have the state Supreme Court, if they are able to control the courts at the state and local level, like they have been at the federal level under Trump, we are going to be in for a very rude awakening.
And furthermore, the Supreme Court, whatever ends up the Supreme Court after the election, will be the one to decide the next round of the redistricting issues for legislative and congressional districts. And that's critical.
Democrats have to kind of run the table, at least win 2 of these seats that are 2 of the 3 that are up. If Jennifer Brunner loses, she would retain her seat. Mark, what's this campaign going to be like?
Well, what's interesting is this is the first time that Ohioans will know who's a Republican and who's a Democrat. And so if the Republicans win, that'll be the voters of Ohio acknowledging that these, in fact, is the better way to go, to have candidates who are supported by the Republican Party. So a lot of people go in and vote for a judge and have no idea who these candidates are. One short little way of knowing is what party they're affiliated with. Of course, everyone should do their homework and learn more than the party. But for those who don't, it'd be interesting to see how this turns out now that we have party labels attached to the Supreme Court justice candidates.
If this is a wave election for Republicans, which some suspect it might be, often happens, first election after a president is elected from a different party. Does that hurt Democrat chances to have those R's and D's on the ballot?
It definitely does. It was very intentional and a very good tactic amongst Republicans to attach party labels, because they were tired of the Democrats winning all of the Supreme Court races, because the Democratic candidates were appealing to more Ohioans. And so what they did
to a nice Irish name.
Well, what they did to reverse that is to add party labels next to it. And so we will certainly see the impact of that. We've seen that in other states over the last several years where Republicans have done it. It has been successful. Hopefully it's not successful here in Ohio and that people vote for the Democrat. I'm a Democrat, so I can say that.
And Pat DeWine is on the ballot. Mike DeWine has fallen out of favor with a portion of the Republican electorate. How do you think that plays out? How could that play out?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's going to necessarily transfer. Again, I think another interesting change that will be the location on the ballot that the Supreme Court races appear. They'll be at the top or close to the top, I think, much higher up than they usually are. So maybe the closer they are to the gubernatorial race, it may affect, you know, it may have more of an impact, but I'm not sure.
What are Republican justices going to run on, Mark? I know they can't talk about how they're going to rule on a certain case, but if the economy is number one, are they going to run, we're going to be, you know, pro-business, or we want the economy in Ohio to keep improving or whatever? Or are they going to double down on the abortion or the guns and redistricting issues?
So I've advised a lot of candidates in the past of the court, including Pat DeWine over the years, and so no secrets to reveal, but I think you won't see them running the way you'd see a state legislative candidate run. They still want to talk about issues surrounding the court. I think the bond issue that's on the ballot for the state constitution is fair game. They're allowed to talk about that. I think there's a lot of talk about what sort of court we ought to have as far as the administration of the court. So I think they'll stick to their lane. That's typically what Supreme Court candidates do.
And they'll let special interest groups that are supporting the Republicans or the Democrats, most recently a group of pro-business organizations said that they supported the Republican candidates. They'll let them do the talking for them.
Mark, does Pat DeWine's last name help him, hurt him?
It's probably a wash. I mean, he's certainly an accomplished candidate in his own right. People know who Mike DeWine is. They know that's an unusual name. They'll probably know it's Pat DeWine, but Mike DeWine's going to win the governor probably by double digits, so I don't think it hurts Pat DeWine.
Okay. Our last topic, that bail reform issue will be on the ballot. It's an issue in the Supreme Court races, and Ohioans will vote on the amendment, the bail reform amendment to the Constitution. The amendment would allow judges to consider public safety and the accused criminal record when setting bail. The amendment came about after the Ohio Supreme Court ruled judges cannot consider the dangerousness of the defendant when setting bail. There are bills in the legislature that would require judges to set no cash bail if the accused is not a flight risk or not a safety risk. And Fisher, this goes to the basic purpose of bail. What is the reason why judges put a monetary amount before they bind you over for trial?
That's so you'll come back for trial. That's to get you to come back. You have, if you don't, then the bondsman or whoever put you up the money is out. That is the reason why bail is set. It has been used for different purposes now, and mostly harming low-income people and their families in the process. But absolutely, the core issue of what it was for was to get the accused back to court.
Mark, there was a case in Columbus area pretty recently. There was a murder at the Tuttle Mall up in the Dublin area.
Yeah.
Man is accused of shooting another man. He apparently called the police himself and turned himself in. He was granted $50,000 bond by the judge. He put up $5,000 and he was released. He had to put up 10% to the bail bondsman. Soon after that, he was accused of threatening witnesses. Bail was revoked. He's back in custody. Did the system work there, or did it not work there?
I think we always have to give judges the individual discretion, but this ought to be one factor they could consider. Another recent case, we had a guy shooting up Interstate 71, randomly shooting at cars on a busy afternoon in Interstate 71. Under the current ruling by the Supreme Court, the very next day, if his friends and family put up enough money, he'd be back on the street. But the judge in that case ought to have the ability to say, you know what, if you were shooting up I-71 today, I'm not sure it's a good idea to let you out tomorrow. Now, you are innocent until proven guilty, but public safety ought to be one of many factors a judge can consider.
Desiree, should public safety be a factor? Do you support this resolution, or this amendment?
I think it violates due process. When we're thinking about how many people are behind bars right now in Ohio, tens of thousands of them have not been convicted of a crime, but they're still sitting in jail because they don't have the money to bail themselves out. Their families don't have the money. So those are people who lose their jobs. Those are people who lose rights to their children. So much is lost, and those people are often Black, brown, and poor. And so when we think about who can afford to bail themselves out, they're often wealthier families and white men. And so I do think, while I agree to some extent with judicial discretion, there also has to be constitutional followings of the due process.
And as far as the judicial discretion goes, once they call for this in the Constitution, that judges have to consider public safety when setting bail, is it a gut feeling? Is it just somebody saying, he was out there shooting people up on the highway? I don't think everything is as clear cut as that particular case is. I think that witnesses would be required, and going to your due process point.
How would that work, Mark? Any different than the current procedure, which allows for a hearing on dangerousness?
The prosecutor and the defense counsel can put on the record factors that the judge can consider, and then a good judge will actually put on the record why he or she is ruling that way.
So they just the attorneys would make the arguments?
Yeah, and at some level we have to trust judges because every case is individual, and we want those judges to make good decisions.
But the Prosecuting Attorneys Association in Ohio would tell you that one of the reasons why they like the way the system is now is that they can just bypass that. That's a lot of rigmarole. That's a whole nother layer of decision making at that level.
Desiree, would you support this amendment if it would combine the bills that are pending before the legislature that would say no cash bail required if the person is not a threat to public safety or a flight risk? If you would have combined, okay, we can consider public safety, but you're also going to no cash bail if public safety is not a factor. Would you support something like that?
I would be open to it. I think we need to abolish cash bail. It really does only apply to the poor. And if you are poor, then you are guilty until proven innocent. And if you are wealthy, then you are innocent until proven guilty. And that's not how the Constitution was designed.
Mark, would that combination make this a better amendment?
Don't know. But we have to vote on the one we have.
Yeah.
I would say this, if we have no cash bail, we have this fellow just shot up Highland Park. Should he be allowed out the next day, or is he a public threat? I think he's a public threat. No sane person would let him out the next day, even if there's a no cash bail policy. The judge has to be able to factor that in.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. And Mark Weaver, you're up first.
So, I've been a part-time prosecutor for 20 years, and I volunteer to, free of charge, prosecute whoever impregnated the 10-year-old girl who allegedly needed to get an abortion. The problem is there's been very thin reporting about this. There's one allegation from one out-of-state doctor who's an activist, and I want to know, has there been a report to police that a 10-year-old is pregnant? And has there been a follow-up? And in what Ohio County did that happen? Because if that's a real story, we need to see a prosecution of whoever was involved.
All right, Desiree.
Because the Republicans failed to follow through with a fair process for redistricting, we have a second primary election, which is August 2nd, and early voting has already started. So I would encourage everyone watching and listening to go ahead and register to vote and vote.
All right, and Ann.
And there's a bill pending, Senate Bill 226, that would allow women or people who are pregnant to sue deadbeat dads in Ohio. The Ohio Right to Life is against it. Another Christian organization is for it. Center for Christian Virtue is for it. The point being that a lot of times women have to seek abortions because they can't afford to manage the cost of a child. This would put the father on the spot.
Okay, and this coming Wednesday, WOSU and the Columbus Metropolitan Club launch a series we're calling Democracy in Crisis. It'll tackle some of the toughest issues facing our country. We'll kick it off with a discussion with Michael Tomasky. He's the editor of The New Republic and the author of the book, If We Can Keep It, How the Republic Collapsed and How It Might Be Saved. I'll moderate that event. You can find out more and register to attend this Wednesday's program at wosu.org/events. That's Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook. Watch us on demand at our website in the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.